Okay, we're a little about 5 after 9. I'm sure, I hope there'll be more people straggling in as we go, but we are going to get the meeting started. So I will call the meeting to order. We will be proceeding under Rule 7E because we're not taking any votes, but we don't have a physical quorum, so that's fine. I've been advised by the technology staff that they're going to keep everybody unmuted on our end so that anybody can speak. So I would ask as a courtesy that if you're not speaking, keep your speakers on mute because we'll pick up background noise. It'll be distracting, and that goes both for the board members and any of the electeds and department heads who are going to be speaking today. So I appreciate that if you would. And with that, we have a new person doing roll call, and it's both sad and happy for us. So Dana, if you would, please. Now.
Member Chaplin.
Here.
Member Covert. Member Dessart.
Here.
Member DeCiani. Member Eckhoff. Member Elliott.
Here.
Member Hart.
Here.
Member Healy. Member Krajewski.
Here.
Member Larson.
Here.
Member Noonan.
Here.
Member Ozog.
Here.
Member Pachalski. Member Renahan.
Here.
Member Rutledge. Member Selman.
Here.
Member Tornatori. Member Say.
Here.
Okay, we do have a quorum. We have a couple of people I understand under public comment, so I will turn over to Connor for that purpose.
Okay, the first comment's from Claire Goldenberg. It's regarding budget. It says, during the pandemic, when every government entity is struggling with their budgets, Dan Cronin thinks he is some kind of hero by claiming he has come up with a balanced budget again for 2021. Well, smart residents of DuPage know this is just smoke and mirrors, and you are watching you and what are really doing, Mr. Cronin. During a pandemic, you are shifting money away from Health and Human Services and giving to the Sheriff's Department, the department you have already bestowed large chunks of the budget to already in 2020. Additionally, you are shifting money away from our decrepit election services during a year when all eyes are on the elections. Not a very forward-thinking move. Again, we are watching you as are many other state and federal agencies, as well as national news organizations. You think this move may help you retain your seat in 2021, but only time will tell if this move will prove beneficial to you. It certainly will not be beneficial for the residents of DuPage County, who will be forced to rely more and more on services from local government agencies as their healthcare and their jobs dry up. That concludes her comment. Next comments from the League of Women Voters of Glen Ellen and Erica Nelson. It's regarding November 20 referendum questions. It says, thank you for your time to make a public comment at this Finance Committee meeting. This comment is made on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Glen Ellen. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization whose purposes are to promote political responsibility through informed and active participation in government and to act on selected government issues after study and consensus as a league. The League of Women Voters of Glen Ellen and fellow leagues across DuPage County are focused on the essential purpose of voter registration, voter education, and encouraging each registered voter to exercise their right and their responsibility to vote. On the November 3rd ballot, there are 3 DuPage County referendum questions. Our league has received community member questions specific to these, including the issues of cost. It is part of the League of Women Voters' purpose to provide information for an educated electorate. As you discuss this fiscal year 21 budget, please keep in mind these questions or comments from community members who contacted our league. DuPage County voters should know the pros and cons of each question and what the alternative options are before voting. For each question, what impact would a yes or no vote have on the board's budget? Regarding questions 1 and 3, how much additional funding will be directed to law enforcement? Will there be additional officers or other positions added? If public safety does not, quote, continue as a priority, close quote, for this board or the chairman, does that mean that the budget will be reduced from current allocations? How much and why? Regarding question 3 about officer training, your published, quote, fact sheet says that there are only 40% of the county officers have received interaction training. Does your current budget cover the cost of training the remaining 60% or the cost of the new training mentioned? If not, what are the budget ramifications? Regarding question 2, will there be additional federal funding on top of the $161 million already received by DuPage County for PPE and other health and safety measures? What do our county health department professionals, local hospital administrators, and community health practitioners state as their need for PPE and other necessary equipment as this pandemic continues into 2021? Do these facilities currently have the budget allocated for this? Are all of the 9 hospitals, 47 long-term care facilities, and 63 public safety agencies mentioned in the fact sheet nonprofit? If approved, how would the PPE distribution be prioritized? At a recent DuPage County Board meeting and Finance meeting, the fiscal year 21 budget recommendation for the county clerk election showed a decrease of $2 million from the original fiscal year 20 original budget. At the same time, meeting the sheriff's budget recommendation showed an increase of $1.2 million from the original fiscal year 20 original budget. Other departments have recommended increases or decreases as well. Relative to the November 3rd referendum questions, what impact will voters' responses have on county priorities if these fiscal year 21 budget recommendations currently demonstrate the county's priorities? Voters deserve to know about the impact of their yes or no vote in order to make an informed decision. Your obligation as public servant budget managers is to make sure DuPage citizens have the information they need. Thank you for considering these constituent questions in your discussion. That concludes the comment, and that's all the comment I have.
Thank you, Connor. Appreciate it. So that concludes public comment. On the chairman's remarks, obviously this is the next step in what has been a long process of going through our budget system, which includes committee meetings, the special call meetings we've had, various presentations we've had both in our finance special call meetings and before this full finance committee, and presentations throughout this process, as well as the chairman's budget. I want to thank the staff again for the tremendous job they've done, not only throughout this very difficult and challenging year, but in putting together a tremendous presentation of where we are now and the priorities we're looking at, and to set a framework for the discussion we're going to have today. I want to thank the elected officials who will be here participating in this process, as well as the department heads. And I want to thank my colleagues as well for your involvement in this process all year long, throughout this process, and again today as we provide guidance and move towards finalization of our budget. So with that, the way we're going to proceed today, you all received the many slides of the presentation, but we wanted to try to be comprehensive. I want to go through the general budget presentation at the beginning. Jeff Martinovich is going to provide that, and then we're going to go through the department heads, and then we're going to open it up for questions, and then I got that wrong. We're going to do elected officials after the general budget, then I'll open it up for questions, and then we will do the department heads so we can get our elected officials out and back to their jobs, and then we'll open it up for questions about the department head budgets as well. And then at the end, if there are additional general questions, obviously we'll continue the discussion. So with that, I will open it up to our tremendous CFO, Jeff Martinovich, to begin the presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Finance Chair Larson. It's my pleasure to be here this morning to talk about the details of our fiscal year 2021 budget. I will be doing a broad overview on the highlights of this general fund budget, an overview of major revenues, a review of how we spend our money or our expenditures, and a discussion at the end of our general fund balance. After my part of the presentation, we will turn it over, as Chairman Larson said, to the elected departments and to the department heads. So if we can move on to the general fund budget snapshot. The general fund, which I will primarily be speaking about this morning, consists of 26 different departments. And as I just said, most of these departments will be presenting in front of you this morning. It is our largest operating fund. The general fund, however, does not include the Division of Transportation, the DuPage Care Center, Public Works, and Stormwater. However, at the end of the presentation, those departments will be presenting their budgets this morning. So with that said, the total general fund budget as presented is $177.9 million, which has been reduced 3.2% or $5.9 million from fiscal year 2020. The general fund requested budget was $181.3 million. We presented to you back on July 28th. Those requests have been reduced $3.4 million, which you see in the chairman's recommended budget as we balanced this year's budget. Our total general fund headcount is 1,489, which is down 9 positions from the FY20 budget. I'll get into some more details as I progress through the presentation. Capital projects, which is typically a pretty large discussion, is very limited this year. We have a small budget of $276,000, and that includes small equipment and the replacement of a skid steer, which has been funded. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we were here on July 28th, and at that time, we were looking at a $16.57 million deficit in the general fund. So I'd like to speak a little bit this morning on how we got to balance this year's budget. Taking a look at the revenues, we did include an increase for new construction to the property tax levy, which is intended to keep the rate flat for all existing residents and businesses in DuPage County, and that would generate approximately $375,000. Cannabis tax is something that we looked at. This is a revenue source that's currently on the books. We identified 4 new dispensaries, 3 of which are in Naperville, 1 of which is in Villa Park that is going to be opening pretty soon. Right now, we generate about $60,000 to $70,000 in cannabis, and we think that tripling that to $180,000 is prudent based upon what we've seen for licenses that are going to be distributed, businesses that are going to be open. We think that this is a very conservative estimate of what we may generate in cannabis tax. We raised the income tax by $1 million. I'll talk about that a little bit more. We are using some of our CARES revenue, $1 million, and that will go into miscellaneous revenue. We have budgeted $3.72 million for indirect cost reimbursements to the general fund. The budget includes charges for indirect and direct costs from IT, finance, HR, facilities, security, to 15 different special revenue funds. This is only an estimate, and these charges are going to be evaluated as the finance department is currently doing an RFP for cost allocations to these different departments. Once that RFP comes in and we evaluate those RFPs, our plan is to develop a new cost study that will include a team to evaluate these charges and a methodology used to charge these special revenue funds for costs from the general fund. We increased our revenue budget by $431,000 for circuit court probation state salary reimbursements, which we did not have in our original budget, and sales tax, which we will be talking a lot more about this morning. We revised our projection from 15% to 11% from the 2019 actual. That increased our revenues by $5.6 million. On the expenditure side, we reduced expenditures by $3.4 million from the department requested to the chairman's proposed. An additional $2.6 million we're transferring to the DuPage Care Center, and that is offsetting those indirect cost reimbursements to help the Care Center be able to operate next fiscal year. And as we said before, departments will highlight the details of their reductions to the chairman's recommended as they go through their presentations. So that's kind of a brief overview on how we got to balance the budget, and I'll talk a little bit about some more details. Starting with a major revenue review. This slide, though, depicts 2 years of actuals where we landed for 18 and 19, our original fiscal year 20 budget, our fiscal year 21 department requests, and you can see our revenues were out of balance at that time with our expenditures, and the last bars there represent the chairman's recommended in the general fund and where we're currently at. Next slide. This is a pie chart of our revenues by category. Again, our projected revenue of $177.9 million. Sales tax obviously is 51.66% of total revenue. So it's more than half of our total revenues in the general fund, with 14% of revenues coming from property taxes. Next slide. This is a detailed chart on sales tax. You can see, again, we have our fiscal year 18 and 19, where we actually landed for sales tax, what our fiscal year 20 budget was, our fiscal year 21 department requested, and our fiscal year 21 chairman's recommended. You can see that we have 4 categories of sales tax. Including that is the use tax. So we'll highlight a little bit on what these budgets are for each of these categories. Sales tax received, again, comes from 4 different sources. The first 4 months of the fiscal year, in fiscal year 20, the county was up 5.48% in sales tax. The last 4 months, all sales tax categories were down 17.92%. However, the last month that we received in September, you may recall, we were anxiously waiting for another disbursement from the Department of Revenue to see where we might be. We did get that, and I'm happy to report that sales tax for all 4 categories were only down 3.28%. So we think that's a good trend. We don't know if that'll keep up. This is the latest data that we have is for September collections. And as we progress, we'll be monitoring sales tax very carefully. So that led us to increase the budget from, again, a 15% reduction in all categories to an 11% reduction. So we were able to pick up about $5.6 million in sales tax. That helped tremendously to balance this year's budget. And again, as I said, we have to watch that very closely as we progress through the fiscal year. I want to talk a little bit about the next slide, which is new state legislation called Leveling the Playing Field Act, and it's specific to sales tax and how it's generated. New legislation will go into effect in January of 2021. It requires collection and remittance of sales tax to jurisdictions such as the County of DuPage, where the product is delivered or the destination. This is subject to remote retailers that generate 200 or more transactions annually and have gross receipts of $100,000. They will now be required to collect state and locally imposed sales taxes imposed or on marketplace sales. And it's specific to the RTA sales tax because that is our locally imposed sales tax. So Illinois retailers who sell through a marketplace facilitator will collect the sales tax based upon the destination, the shipped to location of the purchaser, or the pickup of that location. So we were monitoring this and we finally got some projections. The Illinois Retail Merchants Association estimates that the new law can generate $380 million in new revenue for the state and $85 million to local governments, including DuPage. We did not take into account this new legislation in any of our sales tax projections. However, again, we'll be monitoring that, and we could pick up some new revenue from this legislation starting after January 1st of 2021. So that's where we are with sales tax, obviously our largest revenue source. And I'll move on to some of our other revenue sources, major revenue sources in the general fund. Income tax, we receive income tax and it's distributed from the state of Illinois to the county. Income tax is received on a per capita basis with projections done through the Illinois Municipal League. Our original estimate was $9.1 million, and that was down from our prior year actual of $10.26 million. The last 2 months have been very good. We've seen income tax distributions pick up quite a bit. So we were comfortable adding $1 million in income tax, but we're still keeping it flat from where we are with the fiscal year 2020 budget. Our circuit court clerk earnings, our original budget, or I'm sorry, our fiscal year 21 department requests were 13.53 million. We did not add any new revenue in the chairman's recommended for this. We worked very closely with Chris Kaczarubis's office to monitor these revenues and these earnings. Chris and his staff were pretty adamant and pretty specific that we need to be around $13.53 million for those revenues that are generated from the circuit court clerk's office. The last area under revenue are fines and forfeitures. This is another area that is down significantly from fiscal year 18 and 19. We requested $6.42 million back when we started our process for fiscal 21. And again, we did not see an opportunity at this point to increase revenues for fines and forfeitures at this time. But again, we'll monitor that very closely as we progress through the year. So that's an overview of all of our revenues, and we'll move on to our expenditure portions of the budget. Quick pie chart. Our general fund expenditures by fund for fiscal 2021. We're proposing a $177.9 million budget for expenditures. The largest portion is general government at 50%. Judicial at almost 20%. That includes the state's attorney's office, the circuit court, the public defender. Under public safety, we're at 27.95%. Obviously, that's the sheriff, OEM, and the coroner's office that make up that amount. Public services at 1.53%, and the education area at 0.48%. So looking at our expenditures by category, obviously the biggest section here is personnel, which includes all of our salaries for elected departments. Each individual department personnel is 65.55% of the budget. Other financing uses, this is at 17.51%. These are primarily transfers out of the general fund to support such services such as subsidy to the DuPage Care Center, stormwater subsidy, transfers to other special revenue funds such as IMRF and the Social Security Fund, transfers to our bond funds to pay principal and interest on our bond and interest accounts. So these two areas are primarily the largest expenditures within the general fund budget. And again, our departments will be breaking this down a little bit more as they go through their individual budgets. Next slide. Our general fund headcount. You can see over the last now 4 fiscal years where the general fund headcount is. In fiscal year 19, we had a headcount of 1477. That was increased to 1498. That increase was primarily in the probation and court services. For fiscal 20, we had an addition of 1 headcount, but we are dropping now by 9 heads, if you will, for this proposed budget. That decrease of headcount by 9 is due to a reclass of employees. We're reclassing employees from the sheriff's office for the MyCap fund or another special revenue fund. As I said, the sheriff's reduction includes outsourcing and radio dispatch. So down a total of 9 heads from the FY20 budget. And finally, the last slide, probably one of the more important slides here is our fund balance review. You can see a history of our expenditures with the blue bars going back to 2015. You can see that our expenditures have been very level over a long period of time. The orange bars represent our fund balance, and that is the reserve that the general fund currently has. And we measure that by taking that reserve, dividing it by our expenditures, and then we come up with a percentage of expenditures that's in reserve in the general fund. And you can see a history of that. And ending in fiscal year 2021 with this proposed budget, we will have set aside 45% of our total operating expenditures. So our policy dictates 25%. We are well above that, and that keeps us in a position in case COVID continues. We don't generate sales tax as we had projected. We still have ample reserves to keep the county going from anywhere from 4 to 6 months. And that's if no money came in at all. So we remain in a very strong position. This high level of fund balance that we have will most likely keep our AAA ratings with the 3 rating agencies. It's a very important statistic or metric. And again, we're in a good position financially based on this year's budget. So that concludes my overview, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, we'll go on to the department heads, and then I imagine the board will have questions after we get through the department heads and go into, we'll stop it. I'm not department heads, I keep saying that, the elected officials. And at that point, we'll stop and allow questions on all of these issues. So we're going to begin with our auditor, Mr. Grogan.
I'm sorry, Chairman. While I'm up here, I was just going to do finance.
Okay.
And then we'll go into the elected.
Oh, gotcha. Please do.
The finance department, we have 2 accounting units we'll talk about this morning. The finance department ensures legal and budgetary compliance through a system of internal financial controls and provides reasonable assurances that internal financial statements are reliable, reported and prepared in compliance with GAAP as applied to governmental entities. The finance budget, our department provides services for accounting, budgeting, procurement, accounts payable, liability insurance, and we run the mailroom. The finance department budget includes copier rental and usage charges, office supplies for all general fund departments, as well as the cost of the annual county audit. Those 3 areas compose almost $800,000 of our total finance department budget. We are in charge of accounting unit 1180, which is called General Fund Special Accounts. That budget is almost $38 million. This is an accounting unit that is used to fund and centrally allocate cost items such as benefit payments, wage adjustments, county legal fees, lobbyist services, inmate medical services, repair maintenance of vehicles, gasoline, Naperville hazardous waste, scarce, appropriated subsidies. I talked about the transfers. Those go out of this accounting unit, out of the finance department, such as IMRF, Social Security, DuPage Care Center, tort liability, and stormwater management. Next slide, please. Again, our 2 accounting units under finance, starting out with 1150. You can see where we are at. We're actually down from our original requested to the chairman's recommended by $56,104. That's just due to a slight reduction in our postage line and a slight reduction in salaries due to efficiencies within the department, most likely a lag in hiring that we were able to pick up some dollars for in our budget. Accounting unit 1180, as I said, that is a very large portion of the budget, $38 million. It did increase by $1.2 million. That is simply because of the additional transfer that we need to do to the DuPage Care Center. So they'll actually be picking up this dollar amount, and we'll be transferring out of this accounting unit within the finance department. So that's finance.
Okay, thank you. And we're going to move right into elected officials. And then once we've gone through that, we'll go elected official by elected official for questions so we can get them back to their duties and responsibilities. And we will begin with our auditor, Bob Grogan.
So everybody's time is valuable. Mine's very simple.
I haven't had turnover in my staff for the last, I think, 8 years. I am expecting a retirement here this year, and so I will be taking advantage of the lag time in hiring a new person into the office. So that's the savings that really is coming. My overall non-personnel expense is less than half of what it was 12 years ago when I took office. It's very small. We are continuing to make efficiencies there. In particular, we've adopted an online CPE unlimited online CPE webinar package for my staff, which is saving us a lot of money on training and keeping people current with things. But that's so my budget request is slightly down this year because of those reasons. If anybody has any questions?
Well, we'll,
Or no.
once
So we'll-
all the electeds have done, we'll open it up
Okay.
to questions for everybody. We'll go department
Sure.
by department. We'll start with you at that point. So our next person is our coroner.
Some are going to be Zooming, so.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay, can you hear me? I'm on Zoom.
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I did submit the slides that I had presented, my budget, my current request is very little change from last year. Our department and myself has worked every single hour of every day in the office and in the field during the COVID crisis, and not any change in the budget, which is very heavily weighted towards salary. Autopsies, toxicology, and transported bodies would seriously affect the ability for us to do our job for the DuPage County citizens. And so those are we really only have 3 items beyond salaries that are of significance to our budget, and those items are all related to autopsies and investigations. So I will remain on to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. We'll keep moving forward. Obviously, everybody got all of the budget presentations of all of the various departments and elected officials in addition to this presentation. So we'll move at this point to the clerk's presentation. We have Deputy Clerk Adam Johnson here for this presentation.
Sorry, I wasn't sure if we were supposed to be on Zoom. So when I saw Grogan, I was like, oh, I should rush upstairs.
Love to have you here, Rod. Appreciate it.
Sorry, hold on just a second.
Take a breath. We're good.
Yeah, I literally rushed upstairs because I didn't think the 2 presentations before me would be that long. Okay. So first of all, I just would like to thank the board for its unanimous and bipartisan support for providing additional funding for this year's election. And I'd like to thank the county staff who have been incredibly helpful and supportive as we've all been responding together to the challenging demands of administering an election during a pandemic. And it's with that support and assistance we've received from the board and staff in mind that I'm going to talk to you about the proposed adjustments to our department's budget this morning. As you can see from the first couple of slides, the chairman's recommended budget for the traditional clerk's office does not significantly differ from our department's request. So it's the election division budget that I'm going to focus on. So we can just go to that slide. All right. So as the clerk said during her budget presentation, our proposed 2021 budget reflected our best current estimate for what the cost will be to administer the spring election in light of the ongoing impacts of COVID-19. Those cost estimates have not changed since our initial budget presentation, but in the interim, we have been working very closely with the finance department to identify mechanisms to shift as many of those costs as we can out of the 2021 general fund to help balance that budget. So we can go to the next slide. As the slide indicates, there's been a significant reduction in the chairman's proposed budget. Much of that is simply a matter of some accounting adjustments we've worked through with the finance department. We're reallocating certain expenses that were part of our original FY 2021 proposal into fiscal year 2020. and into grant-specific accounting units. So those expenses will be budgeted directly towards the grant that will be funding them, rather than being included as part of our department's general fund budget and then being reimbursed on the back end. The other significant adjustment from our original proposal is that the chairman's recommended budget maintains election judge base pay at its 2020 budgeted rate, whereas our original request included significant additional funding for that line item. As you're all aware, we've doubled election judge pay for this year's election in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. That pay increase is being paid for out of the CARES Act, which specifically allows you to pay for COVID-19 related expenses above and beyond what was included in your original budget. Now, as I've said before, we do anticipate that COVID-19 will require additional expenses above and beyond what would typically be incurred in a consolidated election year, and a need for increased election judge pay is one of those potential expenses. However, at this time, we don't know the extent of grant funding that may be available, as well as whether those grants will have terms similar to the CARES Act. So essentially, the chairman's recommended budget is maintaining election judge pay rates at the originally budgeted level for FY 2020, and our office is actively collaborating with the finance department to assess potential funding mechanisms for additional election judge pay in 2021. And that's a process that's going to continue over the next few months as we gather more information about what additional funding streams become available. This is an approach that our office is comfortable with due to the support and cooperation we have received from the county board and staff over the past year. We are confident that we will be able to continue to work together in good faith to ensure that DuPage County's election needs are properly funded. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Deputy Clerk. We move on to the Recorder's Office. Morning. Because we don't get to see your shiny face all the time.
I know.
Introduce yourself if you would.
I've been up here a few times and you guys have all seen me with a mask on each time. So if you don't mind, I'll take my mask off if that's okay. So my glasses don't get fogged up. My name is Tony Manzullo and I'm the Chief Deputy Recorder. I'm glad to be once again before you. Before I do start, I also want to extend my thanks to the chairman and the board for unanimously passing our fee increase for our dock storage. I'm sure you will see in the next upcoming budget years how we'll be able to significantly reduce our general fund budget as long as that activity factor, meaning the number of recordings, continues to be at a very adequate level. So my thanks on behalf of Fred Buchholz and myself. I wanted to thank the board and the chairman for that. For those of you who heard my budget presentation before and saw the slides, I want to add a few things to that presentation. But first, I want to take a look at the slides that we prepared for finance. The first line, of course, is a lot of times, so what does the recorder do? Well, our primary responsibility is to the accurate and timely recordings and maintenance of the index. And that is primarily to affect the chain of title to all the properties in DuPage County. Now, we do record other things besides land-related items, but the land-related items are our primary recording function. The accounting unit includes salaries in that general fund for the recorder, the chief deputy, and most of the staff. Some of the other staff is budgeted out of our special revenue fund, which is the dock storage. And we also have a smaller special revenue fund. It's entitled Recorder GIS. And basically what that is the recorder retains $1 of the GIS fee. Most of the fee though, it's currently at $14 goes to the IT department. $1 is retained by the recorder. And it primarily pays for our website related and internet related functions. As far as the general fund, other things besides salary are office supplies, dues to certain organizations that the recorder belongs to, some travel, which during my initial presentation, I don't anticipate much travel next year. However, we will have a new recorder and there are going to be training opportunities for the new recorder. And I wanted to make sure that there was some funding there for that new recorder to be able to attend any training opportunities that came along. And then last but not least, out of general fund, some technical expenses are paid out of that fund. Prior to the creation of the special revenue fund, all of the expenses for technology was paid out of the general fund. But we've been able to shift a significant portion of those expenses to the dock storage fund. And I anticipate that trend to continue in the future as the new fee generates additional revenue to allow us to do that. Okay, next slide, please. As far as the general fund goes, our original ask was $1,509,035. That was 2% less than what we requested last year. After taking a second look at things, we were able to shift 2 positions traditionally paid out of the general fund to the dock storage fund, anticipating that we would have adequate revenues next year to do that, to further reduce our ask by an additional 5%. So our total budget request this year is 7% lower than it was last year. And I was looking at that 1,444,000 figure, and for kicks, I went back historically and took a look at when we were hitting that particular figure as our recommended budget. The last time we had a figure like that was fiscal year 2017. So we're going into 2021 operating at a similar level expenditure-wise from the general fund as we were in 2017. Okay, and then the last one, I think that one is pretty common. The one thing we don't know until well after the fiscal year has ended, and this is for all the general funds, is the impact for insurance and insurance-related items that get allocated to the general fund, various departments. We don't really see those figures till almost 6 to 8 months after the close of the fiscal year. So to try to anticipate that impact is really next to impossible because we just don't know. Those numbers are provided to us from finance. So I won't know the 2020 figures until the third quarter basically of 2021 of what that impact is. And it's a sliding number. I'm not really sure what it's based on either, but it's impossible to predict that for budget purposes right now. And I think finance has a better formula for that. Other than that, for folks who saw me last month, a little bit about revenue for next year. I did see the August numbers come in. Yeah, I'm smiling, so that's good. We took in an extra $700,000 last month for August, pushing our total to date for 2020 to 5.5 million on a 6.6 million projected for 2020. So we're well on our way, and I feel more confident. I was already confident, but I feel more confident than I did 30 days ago when I gave the first projection. Also, we've surpassed 120,000 recording docks as I'm speaking to you today. Last year, we were right around 107,000 for the year. So you could see activity is good. I'm confident it's going to stay that way. The last time we had a number like this, like the August numbers, was back in February of 2020. So it was right, interestingly enough, right when the pandemic started to kind of make its way here. So I'm very confident for 2021. We're not going to change our estimates. We think it's going to be roughly the same, hopefully better. And that's all I have.
Thank you very much, Tony. Stick around for questions after we finish with the elected officials. Our next elected official is the sheriff.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Good morning. Unfortunately, the sheriff was not able to be here this morning due to a medical situation he's got going on. I have most of my administrative staff here with me, so we are available for questions, but we do not have a presentation this morning.
Okay, we'll come back for questions. We can always revisit issues with respect to the sheriff's budget later in this meeting or in a future meeting if need be. Appreciate it. Under Sheriff Eddie Moore is on there, and as we get to questions, obviously we had a major presentation on this earlier, and you see the numbers as they're set forth here. So with that, we will move on to the treasurer. Henry.
Good morning. We appreciate the chance to come and share with you pretty much the same information we shared the last time we were at the Finance Committee. We're kind of a boring office in terms of budget. We did project a decrease in our budget of about $17,000 when the original budget that we presented, and the chairman restored $16,796 of that because it had to do with some salary that we were cutting. We were increasing and cutting both, and so it was determined that we really are going to need that in this coming year because we had eliminated a part-time person and an intern, but we have reductions in a number of our other expenses. So the budget is pretty much the same. We had asked for 17,000 less, and he returned about 16,007. So could I say he shorted us $1,000? But that wouldn't be appropriate to say, right? We appreciate the adjustment to the budget.
We'll look into that $200 difference. Great link.
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
I just said we'll look into that $200 difference.
No, it's $1,000 difference, but we're just thankful.
Thank you, Treasurer Henry. We will next move on to the Chief Judge, who's here with us today. Karen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. We have 7 budgets, 4 from the general fund, 2 are fee funded, and 1 from the tax levy. When we presented, it showed that our 2021 request was a overall reduction of $125,072 from fiscal year 2020. A couple of points of clarification then on the slides we presented for this meeting. Under the circuit court budget, the reason that reflects on your slides now is this increase is because the Finance Committee requested that we place the Domestic Relations Legal Fund somewhere in the budget. This is a fund that's governed by statute. The clerk assesses fees on filings. I believe it's $8, and the money is collected and held, and then when entities apply, the chief judge then makes the allocation every year of whatever money has been collected. So it has no effect on the general fund whatsoever, but it had to be, we were asked to put it someplace formally, so it was put in the circuit court budget, but we did cut the circuit court budget by $36,776. The difference here on your slides is just because that domestic relations legal fund is not reflected in that budget. The other point of clarification is juvenile transport. The chairman provided $17,848 more into that budget. My understanding is it's for the indirect costs of IT, HR, facilities, and so on that has to be addressed. So that's why that money was placed into there. And the only other matter is law library, which was a little bit less, $1,251, I think, based on employer health insurance calculations. But those are the main points of clarification from the last time we presented the budget.
All right, thank you, Chief Judge. Appreciate it. We will move on to the public defender's budget.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thanks, Jeff.
Sure. So I'll start with 2019. On the slide, that number looks a little higher because it includes benefit payments, health insurance, and things that aren't normally part of our budgeting process. But in the 2019 actual, that number is included. It's under 3 million in terms of what we spent, excluding those items. In 2020, it was a little more. We're asking for a slight increase this year, and essentially it's to fund 2 additional attorneys to help us with both the backlog and increased number of cases that we are getting primarily due to COVID and people being or underemployed. I think every other line item other than personnel we reduced.
And obviously no change from your recommended budget to the chairman's.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. We'll keep moving along to the state's attorney. Do we have anybody from the state's attorney's office to present? They're on Zoom. Just one moment.
Okay. All right, good morning. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
All right, our budget request reflects filling all of our open attorney positions and also reflects the increase in violent crime that we've seen in DuPage County, including a 95% increase in burglaries since 2016, a 25% increase in the number of felony cases that we've charged since 2016, and also our pending felonies in the felony courtrooms that are now up 8% in the past year. We are creating additional specialized units to address the increase in crime, including a violent crimes unit, a special victims unit, and a complex prosecutions unit. So our initial budget request reflected filling these positions, and the chairman's budget adds an additional $81,351 to help us create these additional units to address the increase in crime. This will allow us to better focus on retaining experienced attorneys and also competitively recruit and train new assistant state's attorneys, and again, fill all of our open attorney positions. Really, the difference between the chairman's recommended budget and the budget that we requested is a focus on public safety.
Okay. Covered everything. All right, thank you very much.
Okay. So addressing the Children's Center, that $85,790 increase is moving one of our investigators from the state's attorney's budget back to the Children's Center budget where it belongs. This is really a very thin budget in our Children's Center, but we've had over the years and continue to see a huge number of cases of physical and sexual abuse of children go through the center. And to repeat what I always say, these are some of our most serious, disturbing cases, and they deserve the appropriate attention.
Okay, thank you very much, State's Attorney Berlin. I think that covers your budget, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. All right, we will then move on to the last of our elected officials for this presentation, and then we'll open it up to questions. And we have, who do we have from the clerk of the court?
Good morning. Chairman? Chairman? Hold on.
You're us.
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm just trying to find out why I can't I'm not coming through. Okay. Okay. Let's do this.
No, we're good. Go ahead and proceed. Except turn your mute off. You just muted yourself. We've been trying to do that for years.
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman. Good morning. As we talked about in our presentation in front of our parent, JPS, the clerk's office has roughly about 1,500 references between the Illinois compiled statutes and the Illinois Supreme Court rules. All of those, I would just say about 95% of them have the word shall next to them. So we don't have a lot of space or latitude, and when we develop our budget, because most of this stuff is required by either statute and or by the Supreme Court rules. Our budget roughly makes up, our general fund budget makes up roughly 93% of our general fund for compensation. And so the employees that we have, which is makes all the difference in the world, our employees, to the service, to the taxpayers, to the people who work through the office, our legal community, and to the court. They are the ones on the line, on the wall, every single day doing their job. And the remaining 7% is very small. There are some, postage and rental equipment, statutory fiscal charges, and some of the others. So there isn't a whole lot of latitude to do anything with our budget. We are very proud in terms of being a steward of the money of the taxpayers, that our budget reflects exactly what the chairman has recommended. We were actually slightly lower. The difference between the two of our original budget and to what the chairman did was roughly $55,544. That represents 0.083%, which was part of us picking up the COLA for the cost of living last year for our employees. And that was the county portion that was placed in it. So it made our budget exactly what the chairman's recommendation was. For just some backstory information, our budget in 2019, less the benefits and healthcare and everything, was $7,999,250. So we are approximately $3,000 less than what we were for fiscal 2019.
Okay, anything further?
No, Chairman.
All right, thank you very much to the clerk. So that is the remainder of all of the elected official presentations. So what I want to do now is go through first with their presentations and ask if anybody has any questions for the individual elected officials, and I'll go through them in order so that if nobody has questions, we can release them to go back to their regular responsibilities. And then if we have other questions regarding the general budget issues, we can go into those, and then we will go into the department heads and so forth. So beginning with the auditor's office, does anyone have any questions for the auditor's office? Auditor Grogan, we appreciate your time and attention today. Here you go. We'll call you back later. We have an emergency. Then we will, yes.
I have a general fund question. Would that be an auditor question?
If it relates to auditing of the general fund or?
Okay. Then no.
Okay.
I'm not sure where to ask.
Right, that wouldn't be auditor. The finance department can address that issue, I'm sure, and we'll do that. And that's Member Rutledge, if it wasn't clear. Okay, then on to the coroner's budget. Does anyone have any questions for the coroner? Okay, seeing and hearing none, I think we're good there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Coroner Jorgensen. On to
Thank you.
the clerk's budget, which would include election funding. Does anyone have questions? Member Eckhoff.
Have you started to pay out that increased amount to potential election judges this year?
We will be paying it. Judges are paid after the election, but we have sign-up judges with the understanding that they will be paid the increased rate.
Have you seen any increase in the number of?
We have. Pretty significant. I don't have the exact numbers off the top of my head, but it has been noticeable both in terms of the numbers and also the feedback we've gotten from judges that it has encouraged more people to sign up.
We're having trouble hearing the questions.
Oh, sorry.
No, the questions from Grant.
Your microphone on? Yes. He he's only
Most
been
people
on the
don't
board
want to
15
hear me,
years
so
each.
I'm shocked. But anyway, so do you think you're going to be fully staffed for the election since the number of people is up?
As of right now, I would say so. I mean, obviously, we thought we would be fully staffed this far out from the primary, and then, you know, the effects of the pandemic caused that to change pretty rapidly. So, you know, the numbers we have right now and the response we're getting are good. So, you know, barring, you know, another significant, you know, exodus of judges, I think we'll be in good shape.
Is it mostly senior citizens? Or are we getting some high school and college kids?
Again, election judges always demographically lean a little bit older, but we are getting more younger recruits than you would in past election years.
Thank you.
Welcome.
And I just say, thank the clerk's office for where we've been and the progress we've had so far with the opening of the early voting. It seems to have been very successful so far. And just to briefly address, I think you did in your presentation, we heard in public comments some questions about whether or not we've sort of cut the legs under your budget. The reality is that the finance department has worked with your office to bring in CARES Act dollars and make sure that those funds are still available to you and fund some of the 2021 expenditures with 2020 dollars so that we don't burden the 2021 budget when we have access to these grants and funding in this year. Is that accurate?
I didn't hear the public comment, but I think everything you just said is accurate.
Okay. Thank you. Do we have anyone else with questions or comments for the clerk's office? I don't see any. Thank you very much, Deputy Clerk. Appreciate it. And then we'll move on to the recorder's office. Do we have any questions or comments for the recorder's office? Seeing and hearing none, thank you to the recorder. We appreciate it. And to the deputy recorder for his presentation. On to the sheriff's budget. We'll begin with Member Dessart.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for this opportunity to have this special call finance committee meeting. I really appreciate it. So my question for the Sheriff's Department is, the chairman's recommendation is $260,000 less than what you requested. How is that going to, or will it negatively impact the Sheriff's Department?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. It's because we're not getting vehicles this year, so we will not get any new vehicles for 2021.
And how will that negatively impact you under Sheriff Moore?
That's going to depend on how many vehicles I should have gotten into for 2021 or held inside the garage. So normally we get 15 to 16 cars per year. So if I don't get those 15 cars, my mileage are going to be incredibly high on those cars I would have gotten.
Yeah. All right. I just want to say that, you know, public safety in DuPage County is of utmost importance. So I'm very comfortable with this request and the chairman's recommendation. I did want to say that we are funding public safety. So head scratcher is, why are those referendum questions on the ballot this year regarding funding public safety? Because we are training our Sheriff's Department deputies. So again, I'm very comfortable with this request and with the chairman's recommendation, but it is another point to underscore the ridiculousness of the referendum questions. Thank you.
Member Zay, and then Member Krajewski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, after going over the chairman's budget, I'm not sure if we are funding public safety enough. I've talked to the sheriff's office. I'd like to see an increase of 5 in the head count for the sheriff's department. We've heard from our state's attorney that he is taking steps to make sure that we keep experienced prosecutors, but I'd like to see some additional money put towards those offices. You know, I know we talk about our AAA bond rating and we have $80.1 million in reserves. You know, we haven't really bonded in almost 12 years. We haven't done any new projects on that. So I would like to get some additional information on how we can increase the headcounts at the sheriff's office and also provide additional money for the state's attorney. I think it's important we see the increased crime that we're having in DuPage County. And also, I think we have to take a look at the public defender. If we're having increased crime and he's talking about also having heavy workloads, we might have to increase his budget also at the public defender. So I think it's something we need to look into before we pass the budget and see if we could take money out of reserves or if we could, find other additional revenue that we might not be thinking of in the future.
Okay, thank you. Member Krajewski.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to pick up on the last two board members, I would, and I don't need an answer now, but I'd like the sheriff to provide us with some information. I am concerned about the public safety, and as the state's attorney mentioned, the new crimes victim unit with regards to residential burglaries up almost 100%, the felonies up, et cetera. But what I'd like to see the sheriff do, I'd like to see him give us information on putting together more of a regional approach and working with the state's attorney, but a drug and TAC unit. Similar to when I was mayor, we had this private entity, DuMag, which we either gave an officer money and it was a kind of a countywide effort. I'm not so sure that that is doing the job it should be doing. But I'd like to see the sheriff's kind of thoughts on putting together a drug and TAC unit that would specialize on, as we see from the corner, we got a lot of overdoses. We have a lot of heavy drugs coming into DuPage County in addition to some major crimes. We could also work with the local police departments on it. And then to see the program paying for itself, when you are part of DuMag, you get the seizures, how much the seizures are, will that pay for itself in a couple of years, having two officers. But I'd like to see that given to us by the sheriff on what it would take to create a drug and TAC unit here in DuPage County. And then municipalities could maybe join us and do more of a regional approach with trying to shut down some of the major crimes, and then how it would, could pay for itself with the seizures. And then later on, when we get to some of the details, I'll have some suggestions on even how to pay for that without going into reserves. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Member Krajewski. Member Ozog, I see you had your hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Piggybacking on Mr. Zay's comments about 5 extra positions, if we did go ahead with that and started discussing that budget issue, I'd like to see some specificity in terms of what those positions would be. Where is the biggest need, patrol, crime lab, et cetera. So I'd be certainly willing to talk about it, but I'd like to see specifically where those positions would be. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Member DeSart's cat might have had some comments. Very cute.
I'm sorry, cats are, you know what cats are. They have their own opinion.
We appreciate the appearance. Just a couple of things, and I'll get to Member Chaplin as well, but we did get a question or a comment in public comment about whether or not we're properly allocating our funds to public safety versus elsewhere. So I think that sort of addresses why we're asking these questions. There seem to be differences of opinion that still exist out there as to what our priorities should be. We did put additional resources into the sheriff's department, except for the fact of these vehicles. So if you take out the vehicles and then add back in the money, we actually provided some additional resources to the sheriff. And obviously, if we're able to, if we generate more revenue than we hope, if we save on expenses, as we've been able to do in the past, although this is a more austere budget than we've had before, then that may free up funds for us to do things like purchases of vehicles for the sheriff going into next year. With that, I will go to Member Chaplin, and I think Member Ozog had another comment. So Member Chaplin.
Thank you so much, Chairman. So I was wondering if the chairman could provide us, I know in the budget report, it talked about the Policing in a Diverse Society program, training program. If we could be provided with an overview of that program, and I'd like to know if it's an accredited program as well. I think that would be great for the board to have. And also one line in the sheriff's budget that I just am a little concerned about is the amount, I think it's $175,000 in revenue from vending and emails or telephone calls. So I'm guessing that's the commissary. And I saw it's at a 41% markup, or that's the profit that they make off this commissary. So I'd like a little information on the commissary. What are the top items that are being sold out of that vending machine? What are we charging for phone calls? I know there's a whole new thing on the sheriff has done a great job with bringing programs into the jail to help inmates get jobs afterwards. And there's a whole new thing, but I just would like a little more information on this $175,000 in revenue from the telephone and the vending.
In my understanding, that's money that goes into the commissary fund for programs for the inmates, but I don't.
If we could have a little explanation on that, that would be great. Just what that does fund, I think that would be perfect.
Anyone from the sheriff's office to comment on that, or we can bring it up later on at a subsequent meeting. We can get some additional information.
Yeah, I think that would be perfect. Yeah.
Mr. Larson, you are correct. Can you hear me?
Yes.
You are correct as to how that money is gone. And I'll look into it a little further and try and figure out exactly what those expenditures are, those purchases are, the large purchases.
Thanks so much.
For as far as an increase in personnel, we would love to continue that conversation. We have started up a small tag team that we would love to increase that, and an additional 5 headcount would help us substantially. Thank you.
And then there was the question about policing a diverse society program. So maybe in a couple of weeks, if you have the opportunity, we can do that either at additional public safety.
That program is, we're working on it right now. It is not accredited. We're working with NEMR to get it accredited. We have applications out for instructors. We've also spoken with Joan Olson, who's assisted us with getting actors to try to do some of the scenarios. So it is a program that it will be offered throughout the county as soon as we can get it properly accredited.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I know Member Ozog, you had your hand up, but Member Rutledge hadn't had a chance to speak yet. So let me, her, and then I'll go back to you.
For the red light, there it is. Kind of based on your comments and a couple of others, I guess I'm good with how the budget shook out. I'm pleasantly surprised. But the one place where I think that we need to look more at is community services. Out of our whole budget, we're putting 1.53% towards public services. I'm assuming that is where our community services money comes from. And I all this time that I've been on the board, I'm still surprised that there are 25 people understaffed during a pandemic and high unemployment. I just think that that is money we need to boost to get that department fully funded, or pay those people a little extra for the frontline work that they're doing right now. So that's something that I'd like to see their budget increase, but I was distressed to see that it's down $1 million. So
and we'll address that further when we get to the community services department budget. We can lay out some of those details.
Thank you.
Member Ozog.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In relation, or commenting on top of Member Dessart's comments about the referendum questions, in the last 24 hours, I've been asked by 3 constituents, 1 phone call and 2 emails, why we are defunding the police, or asking about defunding the police. And I don't know if that was an intended or unintended consequence of these questions, but I'd just like the public to know, including the people who participated in public participation today, that this discussion clearly shows that the board unilaterally is not doing anything to defund the sheriff's department and want to encourage public safety in DuPage County. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I'm sure the sheriff appreciates the show of support. Anybody else? I thought I saw somebody else's hand raised. I didn't mean to skip anybody. Any further questions for the sheriff? Okay, thank you. Before we go on to the, Member Dessart, did you have a comment? You're muted. You're muted.
Thank you. I do have a comment, and this relates to the sheriff, but not directly. I was actually going to bring it up under treasurer. Is Chairman Cronin in the room right now? Because I have a question for him.
He is not.
Then maybe Jeff Martinowitz could answer this question. My question relates to the treasurer, the circuit court, the state's attorney, and the children's center. My question is this. These elected officials, these department heads, know their budget and know their ask, know what they need for the coming year for 2021. So with the treasurer, The chairman is recommending $16,796 above their ask. In the circuit court, the chairman is recommending $17,000 above their ask. Same with the state's attorney. Chairman Cronin wants to give them more than $81,000 above their ask. And the same is true for the Children's Center as well, $85,000 above the ask. So my question is, number one, why would the chairman recommend, and he's not here to answer it, but why would he recommend giving dollars above the ask? And how it relates to the sheriff's office is that we all agree that public safety is paramount in DuPage County. And just with those, just by giving those departments that much above their ask, that would be $201,000 alone. So that, to Mr. Zay's point, the sheriff's office could increase their head count. Why is the chairman recommending giving more than what a department is asking for? If you have an answer, Jeff, I'd appreciate it.
I don't have the details of why those individual departments went up from the requested to the chairman's recommended. Usually we will sit down with each county elected department, go through their budgets in detail. Something may go up, something may go down, but I would be happy to send out an email to answer your question, to give you the details of that.
And I would really appreciate that, because again, that's $200,000 more that could go to the sheriff's department for those added personnel. So that would be great. I look forward to that. Thank you, Jeff.
And let me just jump in and comment, because obviously I've been involved in a lot of the discussions with the chairman on these issues. You know, we started this process obviously looking over the cliff, for lack of a better term, in terms of what our finances were, and asked everybody to come back with very austere budgets in light of what we had. Things got a little bit better, and we tried to massage those numbers to make sure that everything fit within the budget that we have. We did not want to deficit spend if we could avoid that. But then when there were areas where we thought we could give a little bit more of a prioritization, the state's attorney's office had certainly indicated, for example, that he could use additional people for a couple of tasks, and we were able to do that. The sheriff's department was willing to hold off on vehicles, but wanted other priorities. We were able to fund some of that. It is a moving and living document, and I certainly understand where you're coming from in terms of how that creates confusion, but it's sort of a work in process from where we began and the really dark hole that we looked at until where we are now, and we're going to hope that it's going to continue to get better going forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a head scratcher. If I went to a bank and asked for $100,000 and they said, "Here, take $200,000," you know, it's kind of a head scratcher for me.
I want to go to, I can tell you that. I want to find that bank. Nick, I don't know if you had any further.
I do. And remember, to start, that's actually a very good question you had. I can, you know, when the original budgets are submitted by departments, you're talking back in May and June. And once they're submitted, the finance department, myself, all the departments, all the elected officials meet multiple times. And so there are multiple changes that go into it. We have better information, better revenue, better expenses. We know what's going to happen. So they're refined more. In the case of the sheriff with the vehicles, what we've done, I mean, they have Under Sheriff Moore mentioned that there's a number of vehicles that are in the garage. We are actually moving up, outfitting them now in 2020 money. So they're getting that money. So what we're trying to do when we meet with them, there might be new pressures, new initiatives, but every single budget that's presented as part of the chairman's budget, it was a collaborative effort. So all of the departments, we sat down with every single department, every single elected official, and what you're seeing is a more refined version in almost every case than what it was back in May or June.
And part of that was the shifting sands of the guidance we've been receiving in the CARES Act, and how we've been able to allocate those funds and take advantage of that in 2020 to defer some of the expenses, not knowing whether we're going to be able to spend any of that money in 2021. So thank you, everyone. Any further questions or comments regarding the sheriff's budget? Okay, seeing and hearing none, I was advised that, although I don't think we have any slides on this, our regional superintendent of schools, Darlene Rossetti, didn't get a chance to comment. Darlene, are you on the line? Did you want to comment on anything?
Hi, it's Darlene. Yes, I'm on. Thank you so much. I appreciate.
I appreciate the opportunity. I did send my PowerPoint last night to everyone, so if you have any questions. And I just want to remind everyone, as I know, as Assessor Henry basically said, she's got a boring job. I think right now I have one of the most exciting jobs in the county, but because we're doing a heck of a lot in the area of the COVID. But in addition to that, I just want to just remind everyone that in addition to our, many statutory responsibilities, we're doing all of this with one less person. I had 15 people 2 years ago. I'm down to 14, and we've picked up issues like mental health and trauma, early childhood education, high-risk students, school safety, work readiness, drug awareness, and we do this in a shared service format. So I appreciate everything that you all do on behalf of education. I'm really looking for just no cuts. I'm one of these people, we try to rub two pennies together to make three. I believe in that. That's what we try to do at my office. And we are a service organization more than anything. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me, email me. And again, I just want to thank you.
Thank you very much, Lieutenant. Apologize for the oversight on that. I hope everybody got the PowerPoint last evening in addition to the materials you've been provided. With that, does anybody have any questions for the Regional Superintendent? Okay, seeing and hearing none. Thank you very much, Darlene. Appreciate it. Moving on to the, does anybody have any questions for Treasurer Henry and her budget? Okay, seeing and hearing none. Thank you, Treasurer Henry, for your participation in this. We do appreciate it. On to the court and the Chief Judge's budget. Does anybody have any questions directed to the Chief Judge? Okay, seeing and hearing none. On to the Public Defender's Office. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Okay, we have a couple here. Member Renahan, then Member Chaplin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Public Defender York, for your presentation. We know that crime is up pretty tremendously in DuPage County, and looking ahead to the state's attorney's budget being raised 80-something thousand in order to address some of that. You have the other side of it. We all agree that public safety is so important, and I said 8% up in felonies. Is this budget going to be appropriate to address some of these and move these cases? Because you do have a statutory requirement to move these cases and help those who need it. I know you had said COVID, underemployed, unemployed are a big issue with who your clients are.
Thank you, Member Renahan. I hope so. I asked for 2 new attorneys who are going to be doing felony work to help us alleviate some of that. I am worried about our caseloads. 2 is kind of the minimum, and I think we could probably get through this next year with the 2. And I think it depends on how the next year plays out. So I'm hopeful that the 2 will be enough. I understand you have a lot of budget pressures, and I didn't want to ask more than what I truly needed.
Okay, I just want to make sure. I know you've been pretty moderate in your asks, I know, last year, and so I just want to make sure that your needs are being addressed.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Chaplin.
Yeah, and that was my same, almost identical question. I remember sitting through many JPS meetings and listening to Mr. York talk about, how strained and stressed his department is. And, and kind of coming from where Member Zay is, we have 80-some million sitting in our reserves right now. And if we can put a few more people into the public defender's office to help out and take some of that stress away, maybe it's something we need to look into, because I know for years that department has been underfunded or understaffed. So those, any way that we can help, I think it's important with the new increase in crime.
Certainly, I agree that one of my focuses has been to make sure that the Public Defender's Office has assets equal to those of the state's attorney in terms of their ability to recruit attorneys and so forth, because we do want justice fairly offered. I think Jeff York has done a fabulous job with his department, and we have provided some additional resources.
I just wanted to mention,
Hey, guys, we're having some trouble hearing on our end.
Okay.
Okay, I'm
well,
sure the public defender can say this because he said it to me, but the reason for the increase in the need for staffing in his office this year is because of the economy. There may be some increase in crime that affects probably the state's attorney almost more than the public defender, but the defendants who lose their jobs aren't able to pay their private attorneys, and so they're required this by statute, the public defender's office, to represent those people, and that's where the increase, a major increase, is coming in his needs.
Sure. Jeff, did I see your hand raised to make a further comment?
Not from me.
Okay, I saw somebody, EC, I wasn't sure who that was. Okay, did anybody have any other questions or comments for the public defender's office? Seeing and hearing none, thank you very much, appreciate it. Move on to the state's attorney's office. Questions or comments for the state's attorney's office? Member Zay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think one of the board members earlier had said that possibly that the 85,000 increase for the Children's Center is not needed. I know during the state's attorney's presentation, he had talked about our most vulnerable children out there, and especially with COVID and schools going to remote learning, where a lot of these cases where teachers and schools see this, I think this 85,000 is well spent and is needed in that for the Children's Center. And I would hope the state's attorney could comment on that.
So last year, we had an investigator position at the Children's Center on our state's attorney budget because our budget was so thin in the Children's Center. So this budget now reflects moving that investigator back to the Children's Center where that position should be. I would point out that in 2019, 448 cases were referred to the Children's Center. We opened 293 cases. And through the end of June, we had accepted 162 cases so far in 2020. As I pointed out earlier, these are physical and sexual abuse cases against children. We have agreements with every police department in the county to investigate those cases. And then if they're charged, we have a specialized unit that prosecutes them. They are some of our most serious and disturbing cases and require that type of expertise.
Thank you, State's Attorney Berlin. Member Desart.
Thank you. I did not say that the $85,790 extra that the chairman is recommending Children's Center is not needed, just as I didn't say that the $81,351 extra that the chairman wants to give the state's attorney is not needed, nor the $17,925 more requested by the circuit court was not needed. I didn't say these weren't needed. I was merely questioning why the recommendation is higher than the ask from each of these departments. I just wanted to clear that up right now. Thank you.
Okay, I think Member Zay, did you have a further comment?
Oh, well, I just wondered, I mean, I was told, if you go to a bank and ask for more, ask for a loan and they give you more money, you were questioning that. So I think this is why the chairman, who's not a member of finance, that's why he's not on this at this meeting today. We're getting explanation because there are things that we don't know, and that moving that investigator over is important, and giving additional money to the sheriff's office is important. And I guess we can ask him, and he can give us a full rundown on why he did give that extra money to those departments.
And that's exactly why I asked, and I look forward to the answer.
Okay, thank you both. Any further questions or comments for the state's attorney? Seeing and hearing none, State's Attorney Berlin, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Move on to the clerk of the circuit court. Do we have any questions for the clerk about his budget? Seeing and hearing none, that is it for elected officials. I would like to, because frankly, I have to go to the restroom, take about a 10-minute break, then we'll come back and we'll go through the departments and then open it up for more general questions at the end. Okay, so we'll come back in 10 minutes. All right, so I'm going to call the meeting back to order so we continue to move forward with this. We are now moving on to the various departments. Nick, are you just going to run through the presentation of all the departments?
Yeah, board, and we'll do the
Gotcha.
same format.
Great. So again, we'll ask everybody to hold their comments to the end, and then we will open it up for questions asked to the department heads one by one, and then to any other general questions. Okay.
First fund we'll go over is the county board budget, Fund 1001. Pretty straightforward budget. The county board budget, the county board sets policy for each department under control, oversees the daily operations of the government. And this year specifically, oversaw the CARES Act. So it was quite busy this year. It includes the accounting unit, includes all the salaries for the chairman, the county board, as well as the county board staff made up of 10 headcount. Also under the county board budget are items such as the DuPage County memberships for NACO and ISACO. Real quick, we can go to the next one for the changes in here. So as I said, fairly straightforward budget. Total 2021 budget, 1.93 million. Of that 1.93 million, 95% of that budget is for personnel, or 1.829. Less than 5,000 for commodities, and then 96,000 for contractual, mainly consisting of the NACO and ISACO. You'll notice the $68,000 difference in this line from the original departmental request to the chairman's recommended. That's entirely due to me. Because a portion of my salary was allocated out of public works, must now be budgeted for within the county board salary to meet the enterprise fund requirements. So a fairly straightforward change on that. And then, like all the other general funds later in the year, all of the overhead and benefits associated with the personnel will be budgeted accordingly as the audit is completed. And that wraps up the county board. We'll go to the next one,
which is facilities.
Tim should be on.
Tim Harbaugh, are you available?
I am. Good morning. How are you?
Very well. Please proceed.
Okay. Facilities, we oversee all the buildings and grounds on the campus. We oversee the capital improvements that we do, janitorial, maintenance, the power plant. Our budget is divided roughly about 40% is salaries, 30% is utilities, 30% is contractual and commodities. Two things I wanted to point out to you. We did reduce our head count by 1 in 2020. And our utilities, which are again about 30% of our budget, what we're asking for in 2021 matches what we had in 2015. We've had good success in acquiring natural gas and electricity and saving money, and then some of our energy efficiency programs. Capital expenditures tend to be one of the more challenging things our department does, and I'll touch on a little bit more in a minute. Next slide. I'll just go through the 5 numbers in blue with you real quickly. The increase from FY19 to FY20, 100% of that is in FY20. The elections warehouse lease was transferred from elections to facilities. That's $225,000 a year. In 19 and earlier, that was done by the DuPage Election Commission, a separate unit of government. It's a logical budget transfer to move to facilities. We do have other leases as well. FY20 to FY2021, our increase was really due to 2 areas that went up: utilities, and then with the new union contract, there were some increases that accompanied with the new union, the 399 contract. But that accounts for over more than 100% of where the increases were from FY20 to FY21. With respect to the chairman's budget, there was a reduction of $286,000. That reduction came from 2 lines. $186,000 of that is salaries. We will account for that by lag hiring. There may be one reduction in force. I'm not sure yet. I'm mulling through that. The other one was $100,000 cut in cleaning supplies. Because those funds aren't budgeted in December, we can make that expenditure using CARES Act dollars. With respect to FY21 capital, there was no capital dollars allocated, but there's the goal and intent that capital dollars will be allocated in the 4th quarter of 2020 to facilities. So that's our budget presentation.
Okay, thank you. Move on to the IT department.
Good morning, everybody hear me?
Yes, a little muffled, but we can hear you.
Okay, I'll speak a little louder. So we have 2 items of note in the IT and GIS budgets. The first is that the cost model for IT licensing expenses, that's Office 365, et cetera, has changed from being allocated to the IT budget, which is general fund, to allocating costs to the non-general fund departments. It's an industry standard, something I'm very familiar with. We weren't doing it in the past, we're doing it now. And then for the GIS division, the county board just increased or approved an increase in recorder's fees, which includes the GIS fee. This more appropriately funds the operations of the division for the foreseeable future. Next slide, please. You can see the impact of the cost allocation and the difference. Our budget is down significantly on the IT side. And then next slide, please. For IT expenses, there's a little bit of accounting difference, budgetary accounting difference here, because we've had some aerial photography that's done in one year and not the other, so that our budgets fluctuate a little bit. And then in the 2021 budget, we had the indirect costs. That's the allocation I was just talking about, and some additional salary splits, some things that should have been charged to GIS being charged there. So that now more appropriately reflects the accounting, the appropriate accounting in the division. And that's it for me.
Okay, thank you. Human resources. Margaret, are you online?
I am. Good morning. So the human resources budget primarily consists of all of the recruitment and
hard to hear you. Serious. Yeah, microphone struggling.
how about now? I'm on my laptop. How about now?
Better.
Okay. So the human resources budget primarily supports the county board jurisdiction recruitment and employment responsibilities. We realized some savings this year as we compiled our budget. We transferred to e-learning for new employee orientation. We are now using LEAP 100% of the time for employees to retrieve employment information, including their direct deposit advices, and a reduction in various office supplies and equipment items that we normally purchase. And then additionally, we have a vacant position that we are holding on until next year if we need to fill it at all. Next slide. So for our budget compared to the chairman's budget, again, our reduction is due to the reduction in various ancillary line items, and also, which we'll talk about in a couple of weeks with the board. One of the items that's been in my budget in past years is the wellness program. And so we recommended removal of that. And then also the finance department has moved back into my budget salaries that were historically budgeted to DOT and Public Works, and that has been put back in to the county, to the HR budget for a net difference of the $24,348 that the board sees there. Thank you.
Appreciate that. On to
breaks from the vision. So obviously our mission is to protect the property and people that come here onto the campus. So I have 3 areas where the majority of my budget comes out of: salaries for the chief and 3 lieutenants, and the budget for the outsourced security personnel under professional services, which is Allied Universal, and repair and maintenance of equipment. That's for all my access control, camera systems, et cetera, that we have to pay for. The savings were made by a reduction in the professional services of $70,634. That's due to the renegotiation of our contract with Allied Universal, and $10,000 for furniture and machinery. So we were able to purchase some items this year, and we were able to save $10,000 there. The difference between the request from the chairman and what we requested, we had a vehicle removed at $40,000. We worked with both finance and DOT to come up with an alternative in case we have a problem with one of our squad cars. So we're able to give up that $40,000 in that new squad car this year.
okay, thank you. Continuing on, Veterans Assistance Commission.
All right, I'm here.
Fire away.
All righty. Well,
Okay, as you see, that our VAC board sets the policy for our office and oversees the daily office stuff that we do. The accounting unit includes, it's just myself and 2 employees. That's still what we have. And our mission is to provide temporary emergency financial assistance to veterans and their families. That's our main primary mission. Savings plan includes this year reduced travel to meetings, travel, training seminars, and conferences by conducting them via the internet. The only thing we've traveled to this year is I went down to East Peoria for 1 day last Thursday. That's the only thing we've got our travel expenses on at all for this year and everything like that. Okay, our budget right there, we requested the same amount we had last year. We received an increase due to the 2% COLA. And then as you see down there, F19 reflects the allocation of benefits, including health insurance for the staff and everything like that. We basically just asked for the same amount as last year. We got the little bit of increase. Our client flow right now has been reduced. We've had less clients this year. For veterans assistance, we've had less clients using our PACE bus right now also. So by the end of this year, if we're going the way we're going, we will have, we will be underspent. We will be under budget by the end of this fiscal year if everything's going the way it does right now for the next, well, 2 months. 2 months is left in the fiscal year. All right, that's all I have right now. Chairman?
Community services, Rick Keating or designate?
So I am going to fill in for Mary. Unfortunately, she is dealing with a death in the family. And so I'm going to do my best to fill in for Mary. So it includes the community services department includes 3 general fund budgets, 1 special revenue, and 13 active grants. So she's very grant heavy in her department. General fund support represents approximately 9% of the department's total annual operating budget of 26.8. So it's actually, from a general fund standpoint, it's actually less. I mean, that's why it is very, very grant heavy. And you're going to see some of the changes that are made in the budget are because of reliance on grant. So in 2019, the psych services division was transferred to the health department. That was a big change. The health department forensic behavior health unit, reducing the community services general fund budget by 1.03, but that was in 2019. So that will not be reflected here. So overall, you can see the 2021 department request was 3.68 million. And then the chairman's recommended was 2.59 for a difference of $1.093 million. And I know that there's been some comments about that $1 million grant. That is obviously the vast majority of that. And actually that was done at the request of community services because they are receiving so much money out of the CARES fund. They don't have the bandwidth to administer that much. Now, she was very clear in saying that after the CARES Act money is spent, that $1 million will be needed again. But because of the $4 million that was received for that, she is very comfortable moving forward with that without the $1 million. There were a couple other areas that Mary identified that she made some changes in. The 100,000 reductions from the originally requested budget, 50,000 for the paratransit and 50,000 for the senior services. And it's my understanding that the vast majority of that is now being accomplished through grants, although that is one area that I'm not entirely sure, but I think that those were actually recommended directly from community services, and then they were incorporated in the chairman's recommendation for the budget. And it does include 6,000 increases for the family center for salaries, Social Security, and software license. And then, like I said, it's a total of 30% decrease, but that is a one-time decrease that we will benefit from in 2021 and 2022. That will be have to be back in the budget.
Okay, thank you. That's the community services budget. Then we move on to the supervisor of assessments.
Good morning, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Helen Kringle, and I'm filling in here, soon to be possibly the department head. I just wanted to address that in our budget that we cover the salaries of not only the supervisor of assessments, but also the clerical staff for the board of review. I would like to point out that 2021 tax year is a non-general assessment year, which is a year that we do not need to require notification and postage, or excuse me, notification and publication for all properties located in DuPage County. And in non-general assessment years, we potentially have a savings for postage, advertising, and our other contractual services, as at this time we can't, possibly, figure out the number of notifications that we need to make. So typically in a non-general assessment year, our expenses in those line items are usually less than the budgeted amount. On the next slide, the salaries are the only difference in the salary item is the only difference from our request and the chairman's recommendation. That's probably due to, we've had a lot of turnover and people retiring, and we have had some new hires. So that pretty much wraps up the supervisor of assessments. And then I'm also going to cover the Board of Tax Review as well. Since we don't know the number of actual appeals that would be filed in 2021, actually, we don't even know the number of appeals that are going to be filed in 2020 at this point either. We can't possibly project the number of per diem days that we might require for our alternate members. Our budget covers 200 per diem days, which typically we only use about 33% of those each year. So the only other thing is on the next slide there. There is absolutely no change in the recommendation and what we requested. And the only other potential savings in this slide and this budget would be that we would hopefully have some continuing education courses offered locally for our Board of Review members, and then they wouldn't have to use any of the travel expenses. And that wraps that up for the Board of Review.
Thank you very much for covering both of those. We move on to Homeland Security.
Thank you.
Good morning. This is Murray Snow, Director of OHSEM. This department works with the county and municipalities to prepare for, mitigate, and respond to, and recover from natural, technical, and man-made emergencies and disasters. We do this by conducting training for the municipalities and the county. We conduct exercises to test policies and procedures from all of these organizations. We consist of 14.5 full-time employees, and we also oversee 4 FTEs in the security department. Approximately 95% of this budget is dedicated to salaries, so the reductions we were able to make in operational line items were small, but we did find areas to cut. Next slide, please. Thank you. With the agreement with the DuPage County Health Department, we will receive $319,980 from July 1st this year through June 30th next year. This is dedicated to salaries. It is not included in the numbers above. Now, the department request and the chairman's recommended, there is no difference. We're very grateful for that, and thank you greatly.
We will then move on to Animal Services.
Good morning. This is Laura Flamian, Operations Manager. First, I want to thank the board and encourage anybody that wasn't able to be present at our committee budget presentation to maybe take some time to look at the YouTube video. It's a really nice summary of how our department operates different from other animal control type facilities in our collar counties. Our primary responsibility is to operate an animal shelter and provide animal control services to support public safety and the health of residents and animals. And we have some specific goals coming up that were related to this, which includes improving access to resources for our pet owners and expanding wellness and care for qualified residents. Our budget was balanced with the continuation of an annual $50,000 donation from DuPage Animal Friends, which is the Friends of nonprofit that collects donations that people direct towards supporting our operations. That was in our requested budget. And despite increased demands on our department to meet changes in our sector and the needs of our residents and pets, we will be maintaining the same headcount And this is really made possible because our staff are cross-trained and able to do a wide variety of tasks. But most importantly, we have a volunteer program that's really critical to meeting operational efficiencies. And that is one of our goals going into next year, is to continue refining that volunteer program. Some factors that could have a negative impact on our budget include lower rabies vaccination registration compliance, which is also another one of our goals, how we can change the narrative around pet wellness, getting vaccinated, following those laws, and increase that compliance. And another risk would be a significant increase to the animal population in our shelter. Next slide, please. So the primary difference between our department request and the chairman's recommended is due to the allocation of an indirect cost reimbursement. We are a special revenue fund, so all of our fees, really 88% of our fees, come from the sale of rabies tags. Another 6% is from some other minor fees we collect through owner surrender fees, adoption fees, and such. And then we do work with DuPage Animal Friends to do some fundraising. Some of the differences between 19 is we experienced some significant staffing vacancies, which unfortunately have carried over into 2020. Our goal is to have the department fully staffed, but it's been a challenge recently. Thank you.
Thank you. On to building and zoning.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. It's Jim Strand here for the Building and Zoning Department. Just real quickly, thanks for hearing us this morning. Just to point out, we are a division of the Public Works Department. Our department is broken up into 3 different divisions: building, planning and zoning, and the environmental division. Building and zoning departments handle primarily the permitting. Planning and zoning handle code enforcement, the adjudication program. They work with CMAP on LTA grants, and our environmental division works with the delegation agreement with IEPA on hazardous waste site inspections. They also inspect transfer stations. We're fully staffed right now at 28 people. It is important to point out that we are an enterprise fund. We are one of the special revenue funds. If we could go to the next slide, please. So on the top 5 bars will show you that our actuals are proposed from 2021 to FY 20 to 2021 was slightly lower than we were this year. The overall budget, as recommended by the chairman, is a little bit larger, $262,325, and those are also due to the indirect costs. There's a bit of a breakdown there. We've got an increase in personnel cost, a decrease in medical costs. The implementation of the indirect cost was $231,000, and there was some licensing for certain products that we're going to be picking up as well. And that's about it.
Okay, thank you very much for that. We continue onward to the care center.
Morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
This is Janelle Chadwick, the administrator for the DuPage Care Center. I have provided everyone the overview of the DuPage Care Center budget that was presented to the HHS committee. The Care Center's budget for 2021 is a status quo or a break even. Our revenues for the Care Center are equal to our expenses. The revenues are predominantly made up of revenues that we receive from Medicare and Medicaid for patient care. We are approximately a $40 million operation. Of that, in 2021, there's a $2 million subsidy that we receive from the county. In prior years, 2020, that subsidy was reduced from $3 million to $2 million. So our 2021 budget reflects that. Our patient care revenue, we're seeing an overall increase of about 2.9%, and that is coming from per diems in our reimbursement from Medicare, Medicaid, and the insurance, in addition to a 3% private pay increase that will be approved through the county board process. We're still anticipating a 95% occupancy for 2021. We are now able to accept new admissions that had been on hold related to COVID. So we're starting that climb back up, and we're confident we're seeing some great increase in referrals. We continue to our mission of having a greater than 70% Medicaid resident population. That is our service to the county as a safety net for those, the indigent resident population in the area. For expenses, we are looking at essentially a zero increase from the 2020 budget. Our personnel is actually down 1.26%. Our personnel comprises of about 67% of our entire budget. In that, our care center, we have our employee health insurance costs. We also budget in the care center our IMRF costs and our Social Security and benefit payouts. For commodities, our big items like food and drugs and medical supplies were basically flat for 2021. Capital, we are seeing a decrease of about 16%, but we're able to get a lot of capital items this year through the CARES Act dollars. And that is it for the care center.
Thank you very much. We will continue onward and go through the Division of Transportation.
Thank you, Chairman Larson. I just want to confirm you can hear me.
Yes, we can. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Thank you. So good morning, everyone. Just a real quick highlight of DOT. We are about 1,000 lane miles of county highways, 341 traffic signals, or about a third of the signals in all of DuPage County, 350 miles of sidewalks and paths, and then 50 bridges. DOT is 100% enterprise fund. So we derive our revenue solely from three sources: the state motor fuel tax, the county option local motor fuel tax, as well as impact fees. DOT does not receive any general fund, and included in that is any RTA funds. The local gas tax fund is primarily used for our maintenance and operations, personnel, commodities, contractual equipment, and then MFT and impact fees are more capital driven for eligible projects. In terms of COVID, we've seen a reduction in receipts for both MFT and local gas to the tune of about 21% to date in MFT and nearly 30% in the local gas due to less driving, et cetera. So, our FY21 budget actually assumed a 20% drop in MFT and local gas receipts, or about $9 million. Next slide. I do want to say this slide differs slightly from the one that you received Friday. There's two other funds that DOT administers, the Township Reimbursement Fund, as well as the Century Hills Lighting District, which was a ACT initiative consolidation. So those really don't come into play in terms of our overall budget. So those were excluded. In addition, the FY21 department request was corrected. So real quick, there's about a $1.2 million difference between the chairman's and the department request, and that comes from two areas. The first was last year, you may recall, we transferred grounds, which had been in DOT, to facilities management. It made sense. And as a result of that, it was understood that there would be a no net impact to the general fund. So up to that point, the general fund had been covering some transportation bonds from 2010. And so to adjust for that, it was not in last year's budget. So it was missed in this year's budget. So that was about $1 million difference between the department and the chairman's. In addition, the allocation of direct and indirect costs for the enterprise funds accounted for another $570,000. So some additional changes here and there. So net difference about $1.2 million. I do want to talk about the local gas tax a little bit. A 20% reduction is about $4 million. And again, that's our maintenance and operation budget. That's personnel, that's commodities, that's contractual, that's equipment. So in order to account for that $4 million reduction, we were able to absorb it by shifting some projects to MFT. We actually, for the first time, will be purchasing bulk rock salt with MFT. Historically, that's been paid for by local gas. We deferred equipment purchases. Normally, we're $1.5 to $2 million a year in equipment. This year, we basically budgeted for 2 snowplows $400,000, so substantially less than in the past. Our snowplow recycle pace is typically 4 per year. That keeps us current with the condition and operation of our 40 snowplows. So that was a reduction. In addition, any new or active projects were deferred. The other thing I want to note is if you look at the FY19 actual, the DOT budget is very capital intensive. So the actual expenditures don't reflect future obligations, whether it's through purchase orders or intergovernmental agreements and construction contracts. Even though the actual seems small, the obligations, to put in perspective, we probably have roughly $35 million in encumbrances in the remainder of 20, 21, and the out years. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. On to everybody's favorite topic, which is stormwater. Sarah Hunt.
Thank you. The Stormwater Management Fund accounts for property taxes levied in accordance with legislation to protect residents countywide from major flooding problems. As you'll see, nearly 40% of our budget is dedicated to the maintenance and upkeep of our operations and flood control facilities. The FY21 budget has no increase in headcount for the Stormwater Management Department, and we're able to continue keeping our regional programs in compliance. That means our EPA program that we do as a shared service for all of the municipalities plus the townships will remain, as well as our floodplain mapping and watershed planning. Our regional programs mentioned above also opens the county up for many grant opportunities. Our fiscal year 21 budget is intended to be supplemented by up to $7.2 million in grant funds that we have either applied for or intend to apply for in coming months. Next slide, please. Our program breakdown are the difference between the fiscal year 21 and fiscal year 20 request is a result of, it's about $300,000, and it's a result of supplementing the general fund programs that complete global support for all of the county functions. And these are things that we've heard from other departments like security, human resources, finance, etc. In addition to that, you'll see the difference between our fiscal year 20 and 21 budget is about $5 million in reduction. And that is because our 1993 stormwater bond is being eliminated to bring back about $5 million or reduce the county's payment of $5 million towards that bond obligation. Thank you.
Thank you. And last, but certainly not least, Public Works. Oh, no, actually, there's ETSP snuck in there at the end.
Hello, my name is Stan Spira. I'm joined by Sean Reese, the Public Works Operations Manager. So Public Works, Company Code 2000. Public Works Department is an enterprise fund that is a municipal utility funded by service fees for water and sewer. Major capital projects are funded by debt financing and departmental reserves. The department has 96 employees. Real brief about the system, the sanitary sewer and wastewater treatment services. There's 5 collection systems and 3 wastewater treatment facilities. Water service, there's 6 water systems, 5 Lake Michigan water purchased from the DuPage Water Commission, and 1 well water. A map of the service area is available with the committee presentation that was shared. The department objective is to meet or exceed environmental and regulatory requirements today, as well as to plan well into the future. As such, the department continues to execute against the 20-year capital improvement plan, including the rehabilitation of the Nordic wastewater treatment plant and electrical infrastructure upgrades to the Woodridge Green Valley and Knollwood wastewater treatment plants. Saving opportunities could be realized based on project timing and operating efficiencies. Next slide, please. First, I will focus on the far right columns. The difference between the FY 2021 department request and the FY 2021 chairman's recommended budget is due to the allocation of indirect charges from the general fund. These are partially offset by the allocation of a portion of Nick Kottmeyer's salary to the county board salary line and the movement of the HR generalist back to the HR department. Going to the left on the numbers, FY 2019 actuals do not include capital and principal payments. That's why that number is $25.8 million. Moving to the next column, the number jumps up to 43.88 million approximately. The change is due to the appropriation of capital and principal payments that are subsequently reclassified to the balance sheet. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and last but not least, briefly, I guess ETSB has indicated they're working on their budget and they'll present it at a future meeting. So that completes all of the department presentations. And with that, I will try to go through department by department to open up for questions. And then at the end, we can go through some more general questions. So starting first with the county board and its budget. Does anybody have any questions or comments regarding the county board budget? Member Kajewski, you're muted. You're muted.
Chairman, this is more for all of the ones across the board, but when we saw the veterans budget up there and they said they asked for the same as last year, the only difference was the 2% COLA that the chairman put in there. My understanding, there was no COLA this year. Does this chairman's budget have COLAs in the budget for everything?
No, we can explain that, and hang on one second. Jeff Martinovich is going to explain it.
Yeah, actually, that was a COLA increase to the FY 2020 budget. So as the salaries increased due to the COLA, you saw the budget go up. So right now, there are no COLA increases in any budget. So
that budget did have a chairman's budget did have a COLA increase.
Oh, so I can clarify that. So when they presented the budget for 2020 last year, the VAC did not incorporate the 2% COLA for 2020 into their original budget presentation. So now when they show it for 2021, they're reflecting the fact that obviously with the COLA, that also impacts their 2021 budget. But there's not an additional COLA in there for 2021.
So this is the only budget. They didn't do one last year, this particular department. All these departments don't have the COLA in there.
Right.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions with respect to the county board budget? Member Renham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just kind of a general comment. I mean, I think, we had a tough situation this year, and I think it looks like our CFO has done a great job with making a lot of these things work. I just think it seems like the last thing people want to pay for is government paying, for more government. And I think we're a little bit top heavy in this department when it comes to the county board budget. I would like to see this number go down. I think we've seen a lot of personnel changes. There was going to be one plan and then it changed. And I think we maybe just need to right size this department and the pricing on it a little bit.
Okay, Nick Kottmeyer might have some comments on that. I would just note that, boy, if you look at what the Cook County Board spends on supporting their county board, it's drastic compared to what we do, but I don't know if you have any further.
Yeah, I would like to comment because I know there's been some comments over the past year about that. I did run an analysis for what we were spending on this as far as, Tom, Cheryl, Joan, myself, and Paul Rafek before anything changed. And at that point back then, we were at about $822,000, not to mention the benefits and all of that. Right now, today, how we're set up with myself, Joan, Cheryl, Jeff, we are spending $712,000. So from how it was set up originally, we're about $110,000, $115,000 savings without the benefits and that's 2 years ago. The one thing, and we have done a comparison to Lake, Kane, Will. Number of staffing we have in this department is far, far lower than other departments. So the one thing I would say is just the volume of work that this office is getting out there under the direction of Joan, Cheryl, and myself. I think with the CARES Act, personally, I'm pretty proud of the fact of what we got out of there with less resources.
Yeah, I'm amazed that your staff has been able to accomplish what they had in the last year. I can't remember the last weekend that we didn't exchange emails or discussions about some aspect of the budget over the last 5 or 6 months. But open it up for any further questions or comments from the board. One seeing and hearing none. All right, we'll move on to facilities. Does anybody have any questions or comments regarding the facilities budget? Seeing and hearing none, we'll move on to the IT department. Any questions or comments? Member Desart.
Thank you. I love this IT department. I think they're amazing. I had trouble getting into my my mail last night at 5:30 after hours, and Wendy was all over it and helped me out. I love this department. So my question is, though, this department seems to have received millions of dollars in CARES Act funding. So I'm wondering if, much like community services, if some of that CARES Act funding that they've received could compensate for the budget request. That make sense?
I think
so. I can answer a little bit. So we can't use it for any budgeted items. I think, as you know, the rules for CARES Act, for CARES Act funding, but we did use it for some items that we would have possibly been able to do next year. We used it because we didn't have it budgeted and didn't have the money next year. We were able to use that, and all those projects ran through the tech committee, and all of them are on target and shovel ready or being implemented right now. So good point, and we are doing that. Yes.
Okay, and Don, since I've got you, how is the chairman's recommendation, which is $765,000 less than you're requesting, how is that going to negatively impact your department?
In this case, it's a result of the indirect allocations that were that has lessened our load on the general fund. So there's no impact at all.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you. Good questions. Any further questions or comments regarding the IT department budget? Seeing and hearing none, moving on to human resources. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Margaret and her staff? Okay, seeing and hearing none, move on to the security budget. Any questions or comments with respect to the security department budget? Member Desart.
Thank you. I noticed that the request from the security division is already $40,000 less than it was in 2019. And now the chairman's recommendation is another $40,000 less than what they're requesting. So actually it was $41,000 less than 2019. So this is like $81,000 less than 2 years ago. I'm wondering how this will negatively impact that division.
It won't impact us at all. So last year we requested 2 squad cars, so one was taken out. Again, we requested a squad car this year, which was another $40,000, which came to that $80,000. So what we've done is we've worked with both finance and DOT. If we have any issues with a squad car, we'll be able to make sure that we'll be able to set our fleet up.
All right, thanks, Keith. Just trying to take care of you.
Thank you.
Member Krajewski.
Yeah, and I assume that the same thing is we're spreading securities costs amongst other departments, hence in the chairman's budget, that 3.2 million, Jeff, that you have in there for revenue to the general fund is coming from all these other funds that are being charged the indirect, but you're moving IT, you're moving security, you're moving your finance charges in the chairman's budget, which is different than everybody's budgets that were presented, because I brought this issue up a month ago when we were talking about individual budgets and where these indirect costs were going to come in. And now we're seeing it, especially in this last segment, but the indirect costs are coming out of some of those funds like IT and security, and they're going into the other departments like stormwater, public works, transportation. And maybe you should have given an overview regarding that.
Well, correct. And I know we've had some conversations about that, Member Krajewski. We wanted a budget for this. We annually get a report of cost allocations. That's about 265 pages. So in the time between myself starting here, the recommended or the department requested budget and the chairman's recommended, we were able to kind of open this up a little bit and budget for an estimate. Right now it's an estimate of indirect and direct costs. Once we have the RFP come in for another cost study allocation, then we can come up with a methodology and a way of charging all of these budgets. there was one thing, another thing I wanted to say about that was, one thing we will not do though, is charge these individual budgets before that new methodology is established. So even if this new cost study comes in December, January, until we have consensus from all of these departments that are affected by this, we want to sit down with all of them, make sure that they understand what these charges are, and then charge at that time. So that's kind of how we're handling the indirect.
No, but I think what the issue is, Jeff, is that IT's budget that he recommended, Don Carlson, and the chairman's, it is kind of technically the same. All it is we're moving the 700,000 out of IT and it's being spread amongst the other departments. So hence why the chairman's budget is different than Don's, except it's not really different. It's just that that money is going somewhere else. And same thing with security here, because you're spreading security. Their budget went down. The chairman's recommendation for security went down because you took some of the security costs and allocated it somewhere else.
That's correct.
And I think that's the issue that, and that may answer, remember Desart's question from the first set of funds when we had, that the chairman's budget that we're seeing here has indirect costs either added to a fund or taken out of a fund, and why we're seeing differences. So security is being spread, HR is being spread, IT is being spread, finance is being spread to other funds. And that's why the chairman's budget's down on those and it's up in other ones. It has to do with those indirect costs you've spread among them, which is different from the elected officials or departments request versus what the chairman has requested.
Yeah, and I think that's an appropriate way of reallocating things. It's probably something that should have been done years ago, and we're trying to make sure that these.
Oh, sure, no, I agree it should be done. I'm just saying, I think that's a confusion that some of the people are having between why the chairman's budget's different than the request. It's not necessarily that it's different, it's just moved money from different areas, but the request is really the same. The IT request is the same. It's just some of those expenses in the chairman's budget went somewhere else for IT, but it's still the same. The budget's the same. It's just got moved. I mean, I think it is right, correct. But I think just for people to understand why there's a difference between the two.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Member Chaplin.
Yeah, I was just going to say we had a discussion about that in technology when the budget was presented, that, you know, they weren't really cutting their budget. They were just moving funds around. So there wasn't really a cut to the budget. It was just moving money to different places. We did discuss that in IT.
Yeah, we're trying to take advantage, obviously, of some of these enterprise funds that have sometimes excess capital in them, but also to make sure we're properly allocating money in the budget and doing the best we can to properly account for all the expenditures we have. So thank you. Any further questions or comments with respect to IT? Seeing and hearing none. Human resources. Oh, we covered that. No, we were on to security. Sorry about that. Veterans Assistance Commission. Anybody? Remember to start.
Thank you. This is a department that's near and dear to me. My older brother is a Marine Corps veteran. My younger brother and sister-in-law are Army veterans. And I heard Steve Fixler say that he's seeing fewer people come into the office because of COVID. That makes sense. But are we giving this department enough money? Are we being nimble? I know, especially during COVID, these veterans can be lonely. They have more needs, isolation, things like that. Are we being nimble and creative in ways that we reach out to the veterans since they're not coming in because of COVID? Are we doing phone hotlines and other things for the veterans? Or do we need more funds in order to do some of the more creative reaching out to them?
First of all, separate to your family, appreciate him. As a Marine veteran myself, I always want to support those services. Steve, do you have any comments regarding that? Still on there?
We still do Zoom meetings. Because of COVID though, we're not going out and doing events like all the senior fairs that we do and all the other events to tell people that we're here and everything like that. So that may be a little bit of why our clientele is down. That could be one thing. Going out and reaching out to clients via the phone or email, we have been doing that. One of the big things we were doing is we got that $80,000 dental grant. So we went out and reached out to a lot of clients to see if they needed that portion and if they needed anything else also and everything like that. Okay. Other type of reach out besides the phone, besides our meetings, we have not really done a whole lot. Now, there are some clients that we always contact just to say, hey, how you doing? What's going on, or something like that. I don't, honestly, I'm going to tell you right now, I don't think we need any additional money unless we're going to do some type of special outreach. We're, hold on a second. Don't go away yet. Right now, we're about 16% underspent for this year, which is a lot more than we usually are. And so one of the reasons might be is our clients, for the most part, are not working in the first place. They're on SSDI, they're on VA rating, VA disability, so they haven't lost a job. They're still in the kind of the same situation. We've gotten some clients that said they've been on furlough, they've lost a job, but not as many as we thought we would be getting. We thought we would get a lot more. We just haven't gotten it. And a lot of the clients that we're getting are still the ones that aren't working, that are on SSDI or something like that. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
It does. All right. Thank you, Steve. I appreciate it.
Okay.
And the work that you do. Thank you.
Marina?
Yeah, I just wanted to just add, Steve, I think you're doing a great job with your budgeting. I mean, you are doing a lot with very little budget, and running that suicide prevention thing, I think, is just so important. The Veteran Suicide Prevention Program. You're doing a bigger job. You're doing it for less money. Thank you.
Okay, the other thing too is a lot of the programs that we run, like I run the Veterans Homeless Task Force for DuPage County, and I'm the lead for the suicide prevention, and I'm a bunch of other committee members. That's no money. There's no money allocated, and we don't need anything else for a lot of the programs that we do at all. So I'm very happy with what we're getting right now, to tell you the truth.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for the work you do. Great questions. We'll move on to community services. Do you have any questions for the community services budget? Seeing and hearing none, we'll move on to the supervisor of assessments. Any question regarding the supervisor of assessments budget? Seeing and hearing none, do we have any questions for OEM? Seeing and hearing none, we'll keep going forward. Animal services. Do you have any questions or comments regarding animal services? Member Selman.
I don't have a question. I just briefly want to thank Animal Services. The resources that you guys have put out for families that maybe are struggling financially and are looking for help to make sure they can keep their pets. I've had multiple people reach out saying, oh, I saw that. Where is it? I want to send it to someone. So I just want to really thank you guys for putting that effort out and sort of thinking creatively about how your department can continue to serve the county, even if they're not coming to you directly about putting out those resources. So just thank you for that.
Thank you, Member Selman. I do want to share that we have been actively part of a Chicagoland coalition of other shelters that have been sharing best practices and resources. So trying to, so that we're not all kind of reinventing to the wheel. So some of those resource guides that we're putting out there, all of us are collaborating. We're understanding what each shelter offers because we're all a little bit different, and then using common templates and just kind of tweaking them. So it's really been in the effort of being efficient, it's been a collaborative effort. So thank you.
That's awesome to hear. Thank you so much.
My question is, when are you next going to have any beagles up for adoption? I need
one. I'll let you know.
I'm missing the one we lost earlier this year. Okay, building and zoning. Anybody have any questions regarding the building and zoning budget? Seeing and hearing none. Care center. Oh wait, Member Chaplin, you raised your hand. Was that building and zoning or care center? You're mute. You're muted.
Care center. Is the care center question?
Sure.
Thank you so much. So I was wondering about the 2 million that we're giving the care center. I know it was 3 million in years prior. I know with COVID, you know, they've had more expenses. I see that their staffing is down a little bit. I don't know if it's down because they're having trouble replacing people, or if it's down because they don't need the people. But I'm just wondering from Janelle, you know, if that 2 million is enough for them, or if they need that, you know, that additional million this year with the COVID. You know, how is she doing? I just want to make sure.
So we do have an extensive number of open positions. So right now we're having to pay overtime and bonuses that if we had our full staff, that those dollars could be shifted. So our overall expense if we were fully staffed, would probably be lower versus higher. And so we're putting together a presentation for in discussion with Nick and Cheryl for how do we accomplish that? How do we hire more? What do our wages look like to be competitive? But got to keep in mind, we're also in the middle of a bargaining, first contract bargaining. So all of that plays a role. We're kind of in a cycle. We can't hire at a higher rate until we bargain. We can't fill the positions and actually reduce overtime or any bonuses that we're paying to fill shifts until like I said, we're in a cycle. So we're going to be putting together something in relation to just that to share with all of you. So.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions or comments regarding the Care Center budget? Seeing and hearing none. Department of Transportation. Any questions regarding the Department of Transportation budget? Member Chaplin.
Thank you, Chairman. So my question has to do with the RTA tax. I know we're not putting any of our RTA tax into the Department of Transportation. And, we're having that local gas tax reduction and there's no projects in the pipeline. I just wondering, this has been a big topic on this board that, none of the RTA tax is going to transportation. And I know it can go to public safety, but it really was it really was made for transportation. And I'm just wondering how this impacts that department, if allocating a little of that RTA tax, I was hoping we would start allocating more of that RTA tax to transportation, but just want to get some information on that and how that impacts that department.
Well, I'll start and then I'll defer to the members. As we've talked about very, very early on in the process when the RTA tax was first initiated, there was some nominal allocations and I don't have it at my immediate disposal, but I know the committee members that are on from transportation committee members remember the discussions we had where 1.4 million in RTA taxes to DOT generated nearly $10 million of projects because of the federal funding we were able to leverage to deliver some projects. So absolutely, it is a concern to DOT, when especially our local gas, when we see how important that is to our maintenance and operations. In addition to its flexibility on how we spend it on projects, as opposed to relying on federal fund sources and grants and waiting, et cetera.
Great. Thank you, Chris. That helps out a little bit.
Any other questions or comments regarding the Department of Transportation? Seeing members A.
Yeah, I know we've had discussions on this, but then my question is, what part of public safety do you want to reduce to give the additional money to transportation? Because that's where that money is allocated, is to public safety. And that RTA tax was passed for transportation and public safety. The county of DuPage decided to use it for public safety. Other counties have used it for transportation. So, I mean, it's easy to say I would love to get more money to transportation, but not at the cost of public safety right now, which we know is a large part of our budget. So if we're going to talk about that, if we're going to talk about that, what part of public safety do you want to reduce out of the budget?
Well, I also think safe roads and bridges are part of public safety as well. And I just want to make sure that the Department of Transportation is getting the funding that they need. We're going to, public works, that's different. We're going to be down, but, I just want to make sure that, Jim, I've been talking about this since I've been on the board and prior that, I believe strongly that a portion of that RTA tax should go to transportation, like a lot of the other counties. A lot of the other counties are they're funding their public safety and transportation both, and they're doing good jobs at both. So, just my thoughts. I'm not saying to cut public safety, but I would like to see us start allocating small amounts of that RTA tax going forward to transportation.
Well, and again, it's easier said than done. Then we'd have to either deficit spend, or we'd have to take money out of the public safety where it's being allocated right now.
Or we have that large reserve.
We do have, I've been talking for years, the motor fuel tax for DuPage County has been pegged. Now we have the ability to raise it and we haven't. So that's another item where we could be raising motor fuel tax when gas is at an all-time low. We've been getting 2 cents a gallon, I think, for the last 30 years. Now we have the ability to go up to 6, and we haven't taken advantage of that situation, which could
Um,
then bring in additional money for transportation for roads.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you both. Any further questions or comments with respect to the Department of Transportation? Seeing and hearing none, stormwater. Anybody have any questions regarding the stormwater budget? Seeing and hearing none, Public Works. Questions or comments for Public Works? I don't see any. So that ends the departmental presentations. I would then just open it up. If anybody has any more general questions or comments, I will say one other thing, by the way, and then we can open this up for further questions or comments before I forget this. I had communications with Greg Bedeloff regarding our small business loan program. And with the request that he's had, and he has indicated, as I believe he told everyone earlier, that the second wave of requests have been much more compliant and much more, very high percentage of them are being approved because these were entities that had already gone through the approval process for the Paycheck Protection Program. So what he anticipates is that if everything is approved as he expects, they would need an additional $2.5 to $3 million. $3 million would cover everything they need above what we have already allocated, which is 16 million plus the 1 million for outreach programs. So we can't really vote on this today, but in 2 weeks, I'd like to address the issue of whether or not this board will want to allocate an additional $3 million in CARES Act funds to fully fund what remains of the requests under the Small Business Relief Program. We can open that up to questions, and then I'll ask for kind of a sense of the board on that. So Member Ozog, then Member Selman, then Member Desart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank you for proposing this morning's meeting. It's been very educational, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Member Selman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For when we discuss the CARES Act or reallocating more money to the small business program, would Nick be able to update sort of that master sheet that he has that has where all the CARES Act dollars are? Because I'm assuming this would come out of that $8 sort of the extra bucket we had that we hadn't yet allocated. And it would just be helpful when we're discussing that to see how much is still left in that bucket.
He gave me the thumbs up. Absolutely. We'll
cool.
on that.
Thank you.
Member Desart.
Yeah, that was exactly my comment. I know that Nick has said that we only have $8 million left in the CARES Act money. So I just want to make sure that we've got that extra $3 million to give to I'm all about the small business relief program. I would give them the whole $8 million if I could. But yeah, if Nick could just update us on how much we have left before we decide on whether or not we have the money to allocate another $3 million, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Sure. Just a quick show of hands, since we do have a majority of the board here. Does everybody raise your hand if you support the notion of allocating an additional $3 million to that program?
Well, I mean, it's dependent.
Yeah, looks like we have a majority of folks, but we will revisit that and have a more extensive discussion in 2 weeks. I think Greg Bedeloff and his team again have done a fabulous job, and the ordinary citizens and bankers and folks who have participated in the process of reviewing these, dedicating their time at no compensation to do this has been great. And I think it's been an enormously successful program. So with that, are there any other questions or comments from the board regarding general issues about things that we've covered today? Anything open for discussion? Member Krajewski, then Member Chaplin.
Sorry, Chairman. And I don't know, Jeff, if you could put one of your first slides back up that just showed the revenue in this year's budget. But with regards to our current year, we were going to be budgeted. Was it $8 million of CARES money that was going to be in our budget to make it balanced for 20, our projection at least? Was that the number?
I don't think it was 8.
No, we're looking probably around $6 million.
So $6 million in 2020 was used to help us balance. We projected it's going to be balanced at the end of this year.
CARES money.
Through CARES money. Right?
Yes.
Okay. But so what I'd like to do, that slide you had up there that showed the revenue for 2021, the chairman's highlights. There was 375,000 of property tax increase for new growth. And it was just the bullet points that you had. Keep going. You know, for the chairman.
All the way up. to the top.
Yeah, so that 3.75 million one, I am definitely not for a property tax increase. But under your miscellaneous revenues, you put $1 million in for the month of December. And because we can use public safety now with the new guidance, we can use public safety dollars for the CARES Act. And we have about 10 million, I think, in contingency, and Nick's going to update us, maybe 8 million still in unused funds. I would like us to take advantage of the entire month of December for the sheriff, and we heard the state's attorney talk about public safety. So maybe increasing that revenue number to about 4 million, which I think would be about the number that would be for December. I think the sheriff would be at least 3 million, but $4 million in that revenue number. And then we could look at some of the things that we talked about here, and it also maybe lower your sales tax numbers just to be conservative even more. But I'd like to see us look at, some of the things we talked about today. The sheriff, we could put the sheriff additional funding in for that. The public defender maybe could add a third person, but just keep it open and then see how it goes during the year. You could look at, people mentioned human services or even the care center and transportation. We could put some, funding in for that and still have a balanced budget. And even to the extent of, looking out, if sales tax comes in how you projected it, maybe in March, we've seen 6 months of sales tax numbers and you look like you're hitting it, giving out 1% bonus to staff and salary. But, we have this CARES money that's still sitting out there and we can use it for public safety. So you only put $1 million in there. I would put the entire public safety December amount, because we have to spend it by December in this fiscal budget coming up. And then look at some of these things. People are asking, where are we going to get it from? Coming out of reserves. We just use the CARES money to do that. And I think that we can, have a future discussion on, how much the sheriff would need, or if we fund additional public defender, or if there's money that can be given out to staff, say in 6 months, if sales tax comes in. Plus you can lower your sales tax number just to be even more conservative. Things come out good, we have more money. But I don't know why we don't use the entire public safety budget for December and put it in this coming budget with CARES money.
Well, I think that's a discussion that can probably be continued. We talk about in a couple of weeks, an update on where we are with the CARES Act funding that we have left. And then we're going to kind of discuss what our final priorities are. I know that Member Rutledge had approached me about the notion of whether or not we could perhaps reinstate a portion of COLA for next year using some of those funds. We also have to address the fact that some of those are expenditures that are year-long expenditures that we may not necessarily be able to fund out of CARES Act dollars. But we can look at that and try to allocate that. And I welcome the board's input, questions, thoughts on the remaining allocations that we have available to us.
But the thought is, Chairman, is you put the whole public safety December budget in there. So that's maybe 5 million. And then that money that would have been in there can be used for future expenses, for the staff raises or for whatever else. But just capturing the entire public safety December budget with CARES money.
Okay, I think Member Chaplin, did you have a comment next?
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay. Any other general questions, comments about anything that we've covered today? Seeing and hearing none. Again, thank you all for your participation in this. I think this was a very good discussion. Staff, fabulous job on the work you did. And the department heads, thank you very much for going through this. Obviously, this is not the end point of our discussion, but I think this really sets the stage for finalizing our budget for 2021. So thank you all. Have a great day, and we'll